Good evening, everyone. I just want to give you a little bit of history as to why the church ended up going with the Heritage Fund and arranging this Friends of First Christian Church architecture. Back in the 80s and the 90s, the church board of trustees had an annual review done of the building by an engineering company. And they would submit a report to the trustees each year to evaluate priorities on what needed to be done to the building. And when around 2000 hit, of course we have a change in leadership every year. For some reason those reports stopped happening on a yearly basis. And we run into some budgetary problems, and that was easy to eliminate. So about 2014, a group of us were standing around and talking about the building and recognizing that there were some problems. We decided that we would go to the trustees and ask them to hire an architect and some engineering groups to come in and do an analysis of the building to give us a really good look at what condition the building was in and what needed to be done long term to keep the building restored. We went to Lewis Joyner and selected him as the architect to do the work, and he and Jim Lewis, the structural engineer, and then an engineering firm that did a look at the mechanical and electrical systems, came back in September of 2014 with this report. And immediately we went into shock. It alerted us to a number of things. And when I'm talking to you, basically we're talking about everything on the exterior. The church understands that we have a responsibility to maintain the building. And we spend over $200,000 a year doing that, working on maintaining the building, taking care of the interior and exterior, like roofs and things like that. But when Lewis and his team brought this back to us, the trustees and elders selected 7 individuals with experience in construction and buildings to go off and study this report, review it, and then make a plan. So the first thing we did was we started to prioritize the major items that needed attention immediately. And we came up with a list of the steps to all the entrances to the building. On 4th Street, 5th Street, Lafayette, Franklin, all need repair. We found out that the limestone that they make now isn't the same that was made in 1942. The tower is a great concern of ours. It has splits in it, it's holding moisture, it's in great disrepair, our concern. We had a separation of the brick veneer coming off of the concrete base of the walls on the courtyard. That was so severe a problem, we didn't think it would make it through the winter, so the church went ahead and spent the money to repair the walls this summer on the courtyard so that those wouldn't fall apart on us. The skylight has been a concern for 10 plus years. We have, I think in my file on the skylight, there's probably at least a dozen different ideas and plans on what to do with the skylight, which is right back there in the ceiling. The skylight became a major item for us because it impacts this building tremendously. It provides light to focus upon the cross during the day and upon the tapestry. It also, as it was mentioned, the pipe organs are right under there. And they can be easily damaged. We have a constant leak whenever it rains. Now, the church several years ago, 30, 40, 50 years ago, decided that when the skylight first became a problem because it's glass blocks between concrete, that they built a wall and then put polyurethane over the top of that wall to protect the skylight and yet allow light to come in. Well, polyurethane has been caulked 55 times and is falling apart, and we need to permanent solution, not a temporary solution. And the windows on the west side of the sanctuary are in disrepair, need help. The bullnose on the bridge, we have we actually have 4 different items on this campus. This being one building here, then there's a building that bridges between the west building and the east building, as well as the tower. And under that bridge, the bottom portion of that, the concrete's coming off to the point of where we see the steel in there. The bullnose is falling apart that is attached to the bottom of the bridge. The brick needs to be waterproofed, etc. The list goes on. So when we started analyzing this and looking at the costs and determining the priority list on it, we thought, well, we could do minor repairs or temporary repairs. We could do permanent repairs. Then when we talk about repairs, do we restore it to its original design, or do we not worry about the original design and move ahead? I'll give you an example of a decision that we have before us. We can re-roof over the skylight for less than $30,000. Now, if we want to do the skylight correctly and keep it intact so that it will provide sunlight and keep the original design, we're talking $160,000. Now, as a leader in a church, what decision are you going to make in spending the money? Same thing with the tower. When we're starting to talk about the tower and repairing it, we don't know whether we have a permanent solution, but we have a temporary solution that could last for maybe 20, 25 years. We're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Then the thought came up, why not just tear it down? That would be a permanent solution to the problem. When we look at our ministries, the baptistry's not, the Skylight's not adding a lot to the ministry. It adds some. The tower adds nothing to the ministry of the church. It's for the architecture of the building. So we made the decision, before we start down this path, let's look at restoration and what it would take to do the restoration of the building and keep the original design intact. That started to become a big task, and that's when we went to the Heritage Fund for help at that point in time. Now, I'm here to primarily talk to you about the skylight because that's the first and foremost important item. It affects the floor of the building. It affects the wall. We've had to repaint the back wall one time already because of stains from the skylight. It's damaged the organ pipes, where about 15 years ago we had to spend $120,000 to repair the organ pipes from water coming into them. So it damages the wall, it damages the floor, it damages the baptistry. It also, we have to control the sunlight coming in because it could provide permanent damage to the tapestry on the wall as well. Now, I'm not going to try to describe for you the new design of the skylight that's come up. Lewis is here with us. I'm going to ask Lewis to come up and tell us about what he has designed to give us everything we need in the way of a new skylight. So this is Lewis joining me.
Thanks, Steve. There's going to be a lot of hand waving because I don't have visual aids. But the skylight, as you can see in the program, is a concrete frame with glass blocks that are set in it, and that was the original skylight design. Those joints in the skylight were caulked with some kind of primitive caulk from the 40s, and it probably failed relatively early. My guess is that it probably started leaking fairly soon. But that was a common skylight type for that period. Sometime in the 60s, we think, the current skylight that we see over that, which is the arch shape or vaulted shape of plexiglass, was added over that, and that protected the original skylight. Well, that's what Steve has said is leaking like crazy. So that leaks then into the old glass block skylight, which is underneath and still intact up there. What we propose to do is to remove the plexiglass skylight, clean up the glass block skylight. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Clean up the glass block skylight and place a new skylight over the top. So there would be, again, another skylight over it. This one would be glass, probably relatively flat rather than high one, so we'd be closer to the original profile of the old skylight. So in that sense, it'd be more of a restoration of the original appearance of the building. And because it's a more modern system, we can expect that it's going to be a little more durable, less likely to leak. No one's going to give you an ironclad guarantee the skylight's not going to leak. But this will be, the modern skylights are really very much more sophisticated systems than the older ones. So that's the kind of basic idea on the skylight. Now, the impact that that's going to be is suddenly we're going to have a lot of light back in the sanctuary. And this congregation now uses projection quite a bit. And so another thing we're proposing to do is install horizontal blinds that are right underneath the skylight that can be opened and closed automatically. And so, say, for instance, during the service, you might come into the building and the skylight would be open, there'd be, brilliant light flooding down through, and then at proper time during the service, the blinds could close and they could have, functional projection. So the building could function both ways as it was originally intended, and then in a more modern way. Because I think that that's an appropriate and necessary thing for the current congregation. Another thing we'd like to do is that there's a huge window on the east, and that's now covered with some black plastic, also to help with projection. So we've found a system of blinds also that can cover this gigantic window, and that'll also allow that experience of light coming in, which is a really important thing, part of this building. In fact, I kind of view that as part of the symbolism of the building is the experience of light. And so to restore that, I think, would be an important part of the building. So that's what we hope to achieve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's kind of the basis of how we arrived going to the Heritage Fund and establishing a fund of which can contribute for Friends of First Christian Church architecture. It's a separation of recognizing the building's significance versus the ministries that are carried on in this building. And we're trying to find ways to help finance that so that we can maintain the integrity of the building. Now, if at the end of this presentation you want to give us any suggestions on how we do that in our effort, there are postcards up here. Just take one and write your suggestion on it, and we'll be happy to look at it. I'll turn it back over to Alan.